Good morning. I'm assuming it's morning. It could be afternoon. You could be doing this at 10 o'clock at night. I don't know when you're viewing the video. I hope you're all doing okay. I'm enjoying putting these lessons together. One of these days I may use one of my daughter's whiteboards upstairs so that I can do it the way I'm used to doing it and you can see my face. But I hope that this is still working for you and that you're getting something out of it. So we're going to start with 10.3, solve quadratic equations by graphing. But before that, well, actually as part of that, really, not before that, I am going to review some things we've been doing before and put things all together for you. Let's take the quadratic equation, x squared minus 6x plus 5 equals 0. We spent almost all of chapter 9 learning how to factor equations just like this. So if we were to factor this, and we've done this before, I would factor it as x minus 5, x minus 1. And when we get to this point, we'd say, well, either x minus 5 has to equal 0 or x minus 1 has to equal to 0 for this to be true, right? And we would set this equal to 0 and solve x equals 5. And then we set this one equal to 0, x minus 1 equals 0. And we know that means this is x equals 1. And I showed you, and we talked about the fact that this means these are actually the x-intercepts. And I mentioned that we're going to be talking about that a whole lot more as we looked into graphs. So the other thing that we did in 10.1 and 10.2 is we talked about equations like this and how to graph it using the axis of symmetry. So the axis of symmetry, if we were to find that here, would be x equals negative b over 2a, which is equal to negative 6 over 2 times 1. 6 over 2 is 3. So I have an axis of symmetry of x equals 3. And again, I used that to find the vertex. And my vertex, just by subbing back in, is 3 squared minus 6 times 3 plus 5, which is going to be 9 minus 18, which is negative 9, plus 5 is negative 4. So I have also found my vertex to be 3, negative 4, right? Because at its base, that's y. All right, so now I have 3 pieces. I have my x-intercepts, I have my axis of symmetry, I have my vertex. This whole lesson is about graphing, solving by graphing, and these are all the pieces that will help you graph. What are all the different parts that you could gather together to graph? So I'm actually going to highlight those, maybe in green, just so we know these are the parts that are going to help us learn how to graph. We always know we can use the brute force method, which is just fine, go point by point, but this is helping us take some shortcuts to the shape of the parabola. Down here, and just sort of in the middle, I'm going to draw my coordinate system as I prepare to graph what this looks like. And I noticed that, okay, what are the pieces I can put into place here? Well, I know that my x-intercepts are 1 and 5. Let me label all of this properly. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I also have an axis of symmetry of 3. And one of the reasons I'm doing it this way is because I want to show you something pretty cool that can give you some shortcuts. Now, I showed you how to find the axis of symmetry here. There's another way to do it. Do you see these intercepts, 5 and 1? Well, you know that a parabola is symmetrical, right? And so the axis of symmetry is always going to be exactly the midpoint between the two intercepts, 5 and 1. So a really easy way to find that axis of symmetry is just to average the intercepts. 5 plus 1 divided by 2, which is 3. So this is another way to find your axis of symmetry. And I'm just going to put it here again, just so you can see there's two ways of getting it. If you find your x-intercepts, super easy also to find your axis of symmetry. The other thing that's really useful that we studied in the last lesson is to use your y-intercept, which we showed is this thing right here, which corresponds to C. So here is my y-intercept. So my y-intercept here is going to be there for 0, 5, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here is my y-intercept. Well, again, let's look at this symmetry, right? I know that if this is 1, 2, 3 over from the axis of symmetry, then there's going to be a point right across the way, 3 over. So I'm just going to extend my graph just a little to give me a 6, because that gives me a really easy point to plot. 1, 2, 3, right here. The only thing left is my vertex, which I found right here, 3, -4. So let me label that. And label this so I'm not missing points. And if this is true, and this is my vertex, I now have the 5 points to my parabola. This is a whole lot easier, right, than doing my usual if x is 0, y is this, if x is 1, y is this. Now we would have found those points, but in many ways this is a much quicker way to do this. So I'm going to use this base of knowledge, right? This is really just an accumulation of knowledge that we have used so far to take you into the next chapter. I want you to see how this all hangs together. And I'm going to move on to the next lesson. I'm going to stop this video here because otherwise it's going to be too long to load, as I found out yesterday, and start on the next example.